Hello, welcome back. It's Mike from Canavan Wealth. It is Tuesday, April 18th, tax time, and it's time to do Mike Reads the Journal. Let's jump right into it. Kind of slow news week. We're going to talk about the banking crisis here in the beginning, and then kind of a few topics. They're a little economic related. S&P 500 down a little bit today, but 5-day percent-wise, we're up about 0.9 for the week. Pretty good for the month. 4.8 year to date, almost 8. So we're going to talk about some kind of clickbait on the next in a little bit here, but not doing too bad for the year. So hope it holds out. This is the Wall Street Journal article that they chose for their kind of headline for the banking crisis today. It talks about how the crisis itself was kind of one of the cures for it. This should not be a surprise to anyone who follows kind of my non-Mike Reads the Journal videos about interest rates. And effectively, the banking crisis caused the Fed to take a kind of a pause or a slowdown in raising interest rates, which made the 10-year Treasury yield go down. That's this yield right here. So the yield peaked back in October around 4.2. It's down to 3.6. But this is the time before the banking crisis. It was back up because this was the time the Fed was talking about, oh, maybe we're not going to raise it from 5 to 5.5. We might raise it to 6.5. So interest rates kind of came screaming back up. And then, of course, this is the banking crisis itself. And then we've stayed around this area because the Fed has kind of said, we're probably going to see a couple more quarter raises, but they're going to, kind of slow down or pause at this point. And then the similar effect is just if banks are at a point where they're underwater on some of their equity holdings, then they are not going to be lending as much, which will effectively, dry up that need, which is kind of the same process of raising rates. So, are we out of the banking crisis yet? No. Bank of America still has $100 billion in unrealized losses. Now, Bank of America has said they plan on holding these to maturity. So this will, these losses we're talking about will eventually go to zero as these bonds mature. They're not earning much on these bonds, but JP Morgan's a little less. They've been talking. The earnings have been coming out for the banking sector. They're not great, but they're not terrible. So we'll just have to see how the market does. I did kind of promise you to talk about clickbait. Every morning I wake up and the first thing I do is check the S&P 500 because I'm here in the mountain time zone and I pretty much get up when the market opens. And then I scroll down a little bit to see what, the various headlines that Google is feeding me. And invariably, it is something like this. S&P 500 is going to drop 20%. It's always around 20 for some reason. And, my clients will tell you that one of my most common saying is the doomsdayers are always right eventually. The market will drop in the future many times. 20% is usually a pretty good number that's going to drop. And doomsdayers will sit there every month, every year, every day and say that the market's going to drop 20 to 25%. And eventually they're right. And they say, I predicted it, right? And you're just like, okay. Why? The best example I can give of this, trying to dodge these drops, is COVID, right? The market dropped 32% in COVID. And you have to sit there and think, how did you not, see that? We did, right? We're in the middle of it. The market's screaming down. This is also kind of a similar effect to September 11th, when the market just started screaming down. And what do you expect? You certainly don't expect it to go up when we're talking about shutting down the world economy, or the largest company in the world is talking about going to war. And yet, COVID that year finished up, it was like 20%. I mean, it was nuts. The downturn was over in 3 months, and we just came screaming back out of it. So, yeah, they were right. It did drop 20%, but it also went up 20% for the year, from the start of the year. So these clickbait titles, usually when you actually get to the article and read it, whoever it is that they're quoting is vastly being misrepresented. They might say, well, on one end, I could see it being as bad as 20% down, but I still think we're, probably going to we would see a pretty good recovery after that. And the low ends maybe down 5-7%. Right. And they usually just take the most sensationalized thing to try and get you to buy their newspaper or whatever it is. So don't believe the clickbait articles. Wall Street Journal does a really good job of avoiding that garbage, but I also think that they know that they're the center of all investing news, so they don't want to encourage people to invest or not invest. All right, let's move back on from the banking sector. We're really still in it. A little too early to tell. I think we are coming out of this, though, surprisingly strong, which is good news. All right, let's cover a little politically charged topic. So this is talking about carbon sequestration with a logging company. So this is a review of Weyerhaeuser, which is a logging company all over the country that effectively is claiming that because they plant so many trees, that the growth of those trees sequesters more carbon than the rest of their company produces. So they are a net carbon sink to the world, right? And there's some pretty good, foundational science around that about growing trees consuming more carbon than kind of mature trees. There are absolutely scientists quoted in here that are saying they're kind of overgeneralizing this. But to give you a background on my world, I have a master's in environmental engineering. I 100% understand, studied and kind of know what is going on with climate change. I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination, but it's something that I follow. It's something that I understand. Even now, those that, kind of 10 years ago did not straight up just didn't believe in climate change have kind of changed their tune. You start to hear out of, I'm just going to say the Republican Party, you're starting to hear rhetoric change. Even on Fox News the other day, I was at the gym and it was on and someone was saying, well, climate change exists. It's just not as bad as the Democrats are telling everyone. But if at this point you don't believe in climate change, you can just fast forward through this part. There's probably nothing I'm going to say that will change your mind. What I do want to talk about is how incredibly complicated understanding and figuring it all out is. So if you're of the mind that the science isn't perfect or doesn't have it exactly right, yeah, of course they don't have it exactly right. And certainly there is probably valid points on both sides of this, both the logging company and the scientists who are saying, this is BS. However, I think it's a positive that the company is at least starting to look at it, even if the reason they're looking at it is to continue to do what they're doing with no change, right? Which is largely what the article says, right? They're effectively claiming that they're already carbon negative, so they get to just keep doing what they're doing. But what I do see here is from kind of working with a company that used to have an environmental office, is that when companies get excited about stuff like this, you will see some internal change. They will hire people that are minded this way, and executives will start thinking about this. They say, "Oh, this is good PR. This is a way we can this could be possibly a business for us." There's certainly other environmental impacts, like the fact that they plant largely single species forests when they do that. And those forests are genetically modified, not modified, but genetically selected, I would say, in order to grow quick, and produce the type of attributes they want as a logging company. Because if you don't understand logging company, I grew up in an area where logging was like, a paper mill is what ran my town. So I understand this. These forests were planted all around me when I was a kid. But lumber companies nowadays typically are cutting down the trees that they planted X number of years ago, right? They own tracts of land. And when they cut trees down, they just plant more forests, the types of forests they want. And then they come back and harvest them. They own massive tracts of land. Often that land is often leased out to like hunting clubs and things like that in the time that they're not logging them. So I certainly wouldn't call them public lands. If you're in the West, it's very familiar with how a lot of power companies own a lot of the waterways in the West. And they're often the fisheries, right? So like I'm a big fly fisherman and I'm almost always fishing on utility land, but they make it public access, right? So I'm not trying to make these guys out as heroes or villains. It's just nice to see that they're starting to think and talk about this in a way that I think is constructive. Is this, are they probably carbon negative? I don't know, right? And I don't think they know, and I don't think the scientists know, because I don't think anyone has been able to get it that accurate for one specific company. But they're starting to move that way. And that's what I think is my one message to everyone, is that yes, it seems like an insurmountable problem. And I think at this point, I at least understand, or I think that we will do substantial lasting damage to the world through climate change. But that doesn't mean that we can't do something, and it doesn't mean that we can't make the situation better. And everyone just needs to be working a little bit to start reducing their carbon footprint. And it's nice to see companies starting to do that. Whether it's for the right reasons or not, who knows? It's making it the Wall Street Journal. So there's at least eyes on it. All right, the next one, also kind of politically charged. Companies that give everyone the day off when life gets stressful. This is talking about major companies that are starting to give effectively more time off. This is really what this is. The specific one was a company that gives 4 days off, but they're all the same day, right? So it's not like you get 4 additional days off. The company literally just shuts down, effectively have like 4 Mondays off a year that are not holidays. They're just days for you to have off. They specifically cited doing that for mental health reasons, kind of clearing your head, and so that when you come back from your day off, you don't have a pile of work because all of your other coworkers were off as well. So like the company just didn't work that day. I think a lot of people, it has been the theme through U.S. history that we think the younger generations are too soft, have it too easy. Well, the simple truth is that each generation has it easier in some ways and harder in others. But I think the net result of that is easier. I certainly had an easier go of life than I think my grandparents did, right? And they certainly had an easier go of life than people in the late 1800s, early 1900s, right? This is just human evolution. The world is getting easier and better. And the things that are important and that matter to workers they just are a product of the environment. And I often, when people complain, people don't complain about millennials much anymore, largely because they're starting to kind of run the place now. But back when millennials were first entering the workforce, of course, during the global financial crisis, there was a lot of complaints about the millennials being lazy, whatever it was. And I would often say, you raised us. I'm technically not a millennial. I'm like a cusper. I'm like the youngest of Gen X or the oldest of the millennials. But I did this because I was a parent at this time, right? And I realized I used to think I hated kids, and I eventually realized I didn't hate kids. I hated other people's kids, and then I realized I don't even hate other people's kids. I hate the way other people raise their kids, right? And probably other people hate the way I raise my kids. But we are raising the younger generation in the environment that we built. So let's stop blaming them for being the way they turned out, which we controlled. Okay, it's the product of the environment that we gave them. So this, I think the biggest thing that this article does is the company is doing this for economic reasons, meaning it's a tight labor market. They're trying to get the best talent. And they think their company is more productive doing this than not doing it. It's not because they're woke. It's not because of any other reason. This is just the best way for them to produce this. I was talking with a client the other day about the Budweiser scandal with their gender politics and everything. And I'm not going to go into that. But companies embrace things for typically economic reasons, right? They think they're going to get more support going one way or the other. And if they're doing something for their employees, it's typically because they think their employees want it. I don't think there's a whole lot of other reasons that major corporations do things. And I'm not saying that because I think they're bad organizations, that they're doing this for money. That's why companies exist, to make money. If they don't, They're called charities or foundations or nonprofits, right? Corporations exist to make money. If they are supporting a cause, there's an economic reason that they're doing that. And I don't blame them for that, one way or the other, whether they support a conservative cause, a liberal cause, whatever it is, right? They have clients and they're trying to attract new ones or keep current ones. Okay. All right. That is really it. This, kind of changing in generational things, talking about younger kids, is a perfect thing. Did I? I do have another slide. Yeah. Seminar is tomorrow. Yeah. The Wednesday, whatever tomorrow is, 19th, for the new middle class. It's going to talk about generational changes, wealth building up for younger generations. That is going to be really good. You can register for it on the website, or if you're a client, you probably got an email very recently, or you can just drop into it times on the website, although you will need the link. So you can send me an email for that. I hope this has been informative. I will talk to you soon. Thanks.